This one right here is a cheaper Chinese stock that will freaking rip, like you can see here, if it gets a back heavy bounce this heavily. I don't know if it's supposed to rain here.
begin.
Give me just a second to make sure that I've got everything pulled up here. Let me switch this over now. We go look at the charts. All right, I'm gonna dive in on Tesla because everybody's freaking out on Tesla. But if you look, this is exactly what the chart showed. So, all right, what's going on with Tesla? Let's look at the 4 hour and then we'll talk through it. I know there's lots of lines, but we'll talk through everything that's going on here. So if you go back and if I was to look at historical charts, what we had on Tesla back in December, right, is it broke this uptrend. And what happened was there was actually a pennant that formed on Tesla in this realm that we broke down from. I'd have to go back and look at what was specifically drawn to show you and illustrate that, but we broke down from that pennant to the downside. A lot of people looked at it as a bullish pennant, and it could have been a bullish pennant as well, but the truth is we didn't know which direction that the pennant was going to break. That is why it is very important to not only look at stuff like this from one perspective and instead look at from both sides. To be clear, I remain in Tesla shares. I actually bought to close some of my covered calls today finally, which was ridiculous because they were sold for over $5,000 each and bought to close for $130 each. So that's net profit that also hedged for all this downside movement and protected my gains on the shares. So I'll be looking for another bounce, ideally at the support. But to kind of talk through in a bit more detail what was going on with Tesla here, the pennant broke to the downside. I believe it was drawn following along right here, but what happened was it broke to the downside, it bounced to retest, and it rejected off the lower trend line of the pennant. So here I can draw that to show, because I believe, if I was to go back and look, that was drawn right here. So what you had was a break of the pennant to the downside, a bounce at support, retest, and rejection, and then downward continuation. So this is an important thing to watch on a lot of these setups. I'm going to go ahead and delete that just so it's out of the way. Trying to keep this a little bit more clean. But when we saw that break of trend followed by the break of the pennant, that's where my targets to downside again was not advising people to swing puts by any means on Tesla. I stuck with covered calls on my shares. I couldn't advocate people swing calls or puts on Tesla. The risk to reward just didn't make sense. And this is why. Not that you couldn't have made bank on puts with this setup, but also if it chopped in that range, it would have burned up contracts. So for me, it doesn't make sense on either side to do that. But what happened today? So today, for one, we broke to the downside of the measured move here and filled the first gap at 345.16. But not only that, Tesla continued to dive. And one important thing to note here is this may not be the end of the dive. If you saw the technical analysis that I posted Friday for Tesla with the first drop, followed by the update I posted yesterday, it specifically calls out the volume increase, showing that sellers are actually increasing and not letting up. So what do we see again today? We see a large increase in seller volume that came into play here, which is why we didn't stop at the 345.16 gap fill. Instead, it caught like a little bitty quiver way early in the morning session there. You can see it tapped the gap fill, and then sellers stepped right back in and just continued selling. And we saw a massive sell-off all day. I actually, for a minute, thought that we were going to go ahead and fill this 324.68 gap fill to the downside as well. One thing I want to caution people on here with Tesla is this is not one of those let me buy the dip and hope it bounce type situations. That's how you can get trapped in a very, very bad situation with really expensive options or people selling premiums, especially if it gets like a little slight retracement bounce. Not saying someone can't scalp and make call gains off that. Personally, I won't be doing that. The contracts aren't going to make sense. What I'm going to do is sell to open more covered calls the first opportunity I get to re-hedge my longer term shareholding position. So aside from what we've already been looking at, there's actually now a head and shoulders formed fully here on Tesla as well. So what do we need to watch out for Tesla going forward? What you need to watch out for is this crap like what we saw in 2022. People like to forget that we can drop very, very hard from Tesla in this range. I'm in no way saying that we go sub 200 or anything like that. I'm saying tread carefully. Don't sit here and expect that we're immediately going to soar back to $400 or $500. There's lots of negative catalysts going on with Tesla at the moment, so tread cautiously and carefully here. This trend is still uptrend. I'm going to go ahead and delete this line. Actually, I'll leave that so we can talk through it later in the week as another learning opportunity, but this line was a longer term uptrend for Tesla based off the weekly and monthly. So what are we watching here on Tesla? We are watching to see, sorry, let me click this. I'll do it on the weekly so that it's not so much going on, even though it's still a lot. You're watching to see, will Tesla catch a bounce at any of these trends? Anywhere, especially you have confluence like this 324.68 gap fill, I want to see, does it bounce there a little bit, kind of like it did in the past over here, or does it just keep plunging through it? If we crack 300, the psychological factor kicks in, and even though this trend is here, if we lose that trend and the 300 level at the same time, it gets dirty fast. And you've already seen how quickly Tesla has started filling gaps to the downside. Don't be shocked if it very quickly in the coming weeks fills the 273 or 255 gap. It also fills the gap down here at 218. So again, not saying it immediately goes there or that it definitely will, saying trade cautiously here, hedge your positions if you're doing anything. I won't advise anybody to get into swing calls or puts on a setup like that. Let me see here, tickers, because I got a few that came in from Chapito. Yeah, I'll do SPY and Hood here in a minute. Let's check out NVIDIA real quick, because NVIDIA's got some little hesitancy going on. And we're seeing some red flags that I think a lot of people are going to completely and totally ignore here. And it can be dangerous if you do that. So I am loving from this standpoint that NVIDIA was able to catch that strong bounce last week, because like I told you last week, I really needed to sell covered calls on my shares again, which I did yesterday, and they're up nicely at the moment. But you want to see what's the follow through going to look like here, because we're actually at risk here if this reverses. If it can't follow through, we've got tons of data tomorrow and Thursday and Friday. But what am I looking for on NVIDIA here? Let me make this smaller. So NVIDIA, I want to see, is this a retracement bounce that ends up rejecting and dropping lower? Or are we going to hold this, have continuation upward? But what is concerning here on the chart? Like we've talked about previous times before, when price action is moving up and volume is moving down, you have buyer exhaustion occurring. So we still have decent volume overall with that volume profile, but it is trending downward while price action has attempted to move higher, right? So you want to watch out here for a reversal. We won't know until we see kind of how the weekly candle closes here on Friday, whether or not we're going to get a weekly candle close that's signifying an attempted reversal, or if we're going to potentially reject and drop lower. Don't fall into the hype idea that everything has to pump into earnings. You've seen multiple examples of that not being the case, and that's not a trading strategy. So again, trade cautiously. I remain bullish long-term on NVIDIA, just like I do with Tesla, but I most certainly sold covered calls on my NVIDIA shares to hedge my position accordingly. If you don't have enough shares to do that, you can also consider puts or something like that, just to hedge accordingly, not to actively trade them necessarily. So that's what NVIDIA is looking like. SPY had a nice bullish engulfing today, which a lot of that was driven by NVIDIA staying propped up. I'm watching this to see if that bullish engulfing retains, or we actually had good volume today. That was good too. But Apple and NVIDIA both helped to kind of press it up. But Apple was concerning a bit, because not only did it pump like that, it also rejected exactly at that previous resistance level. So watch this to see if Apple breaks the downside. Jumping back to SPY though, it's really important that SPY keeps the 601 range, because that's a critical level of support for it. We are attempting to hold this current uptrend on the shorter time frame here, but also the concerning part here is that we've had lower highs. So if you're looking at this from a trend standpoint, you have a high, a low, a lower high, a lower low, a lower high. So we either break this downtrend and form a higher high above this high, or we're about to form a lower low and continue that downtrend. That's why you want to be cautious. Again, not trading swing calls or puts on SPY here just doesn't make sense for me. QQQ is going to look similar, but QQQ actually tells a little bit more of a concerning story here that looks like a potential rejection at that downtrend. So dissipating volume as well. So watch QQQ, because ultimately whatever QQQ and big tech does, SPY is going to follow suit due to weightings. So definitely keep an eye on a lot of things here. I'll post kind of detailed worded breakdowns and analysis for all these big tech tickers either later tonight or in the morning for y'all. Want to make sure I cover some of these others for people. AI. Here, I haven't actually. I want to click on SMCI real quick because I haven't looked to see what their earnings even did in after hours. Okay, cool. So they at least got some kind of pop. I don't know if any of y'all looked at the implied volatility though, but it's absurd for SMCI options. So even if this thing moves like 10% gain overnight, there's still going to be a crap load of call options that get completely and totally IV crushed on SMCI. Same thing if it tanks. If it drops, 5-10%, there's still going to be a crap load of puts on SMCI that get completely and totally crushed due to IV crush. So I looked earlier today, it was some insane amount of implied move baked in. I think it was like 140% move baked into the March options already, which is crazy. And then almost like a 30% move baked into the more near-term options. But yeah, I'm not trading this thing here. Even if it gets a little retracement bounce here, this setup overall is just not worth it for me. Especially with all their shady accounting practices and stuff. Just not one I'm going to mess with. One I will circle back on. Yeah, I'll definitely cover Palantir for you. But I want to look at Intel because this one had a fantastic rip earlier this morning. And is now flagging yet again. So especially if it can hold above that resistance level. I mean, this thing ripped this morning. We were in calls and shares that printed nicely. I went ahead and trimmed some of my calls. The shares, I'm just along for the ride. We'll see what happens. But I want to see what keeps on happening with Intel. It had the strong support zone here. And then nice big buying volume. So that actually could have continuation. But jump over to Palantir. Because this is all of our favorite stock for the given time. What do we got going on Palantir? Daily volume dissipation is to be expected. Measured move of the most recent bull flag on this thing, by the way, was this, which it invalidated. It came up a little bit short with the move this morning, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this so that we're not chasing after a pattern that's invalidated. But it's also got a larger time frame bull flag formed here. So especially if this thing can keep and hold above that 109 range, you could definitely see more upward continuation. If anybody's like telling you YOLO into puts, don't do it. And it's very rare for me to flat out say that, but Palantir is one that I've watched people the entire time that I've been in it since, when was this? January 2024 on share entry, right? So I've literally watched people every single big breakout on earnings talk about buying the dip on the pullback to the previous prices, and it's never gone back to the previous prices. The closest it came was on this random dip it had that 1 August, and even then it caught this support. It didn't go back to previous lows. So ever since then, it's been ripping. Shares are still currently up. Yeah, do the math, right? So over 500%, and calls are still ripping. I've got a runner. I've trimmed most of my calls here because they're for March expiration. I didn't want to mess around with it, but they're kind of bouncing back and forth between 800% and 1,000% gain with the entry right there. So Palantir's still looking strong. A lot of people don't really get how the SaaS metrics and SaaS overall valuations work, but I work in the industry. Palantir is looking solid from multiple different standpoints at this point, so definitely keep an eye on Palantir. I'll be looking at it for any kind of retracement opportunity to enter more long calls on it. Ideally, I would love to see this gap filled, but there's no guarantee that we fill that gap. We've got multiple gaps on some of these others, and while gaps tend to get historically filled, I don't know, Palantir's got a lot of steam from the big boys behind it right now, so maybe we fill the gaps. If it does, that'll be opportunities. I load the boat, but definitely keep an eye on it. I'm not saying just buy more today. I'd be patient. Patience always pays. There's another one that just keeps on ripping. What is here? Before I even do hood, we need to look at Bitcoin because y'all know that Bitcoin's been a strong driver for a lot of movement. people are probably freaking out on Bitcoin, and right here is yet another great opportunity while it's still maintaining this bull flag on the weekly time frame. So until we start getting weekly closes that are below that 88, 87K range, I'm not concerned. In fact, I actually kind of dig this setup at the moment. Also, price action. If we get a breakout of that downtrend, it'll be good. The reason I'm looking at that is because if Bitcoin gets a rip, Hood's going with it. So Hood, I think people might have thought I was nuts when I entered and did the measured move on Hood way back when. So that was back in July of last year, but this thing played out that inverse head and shoulders beautifully and perfectly made that full measured move. So I didn't skip one analyzer. I'm going back to AI, Wolf, and UAL here in a minute. I wanted to make sure for Wolf we had covered a bit of crypto first, and AI I'm going to circle back here in just a sec. Hood, watching this level, I want to see whether or not it retraces in the zone. No, you're good, dude. Whether it backtests and holds the support range and moves higher. If it does, I'll be looking for opportunities to enter more long calls on it, just like I did on the previous pullbacks along the way. But Hood overall still looking bullish. I'll post a detailed analysis with kind of levels and key things to look at for this one as well here in a little bit. AI. So AI had a big fat drop today due to multiple things going on. Especially tariffs are going to keep on impacting semiconductors and stuff. But AI I really don't get concerned about. Like, I'll keep on trading calls off that support bounce every time it confirms the bounce reversal. Because I need to go update my tracker. But the AI calls that I was in tagged a really nice high yesterday. I trimmed some there. And I'll look for the opportunity to re-enter those on the back test. But as of right now, AI still holding above that key critical support level. This was a blessing. This little dip below that bounced immediately. If anybody got in there, fantastic. But yeah, I'll break down and do the detailed analysis for this one with all the words and stuff, so you can just reference it to make life easy. And let's look at UAL real quick. Well, that's bull flag. I don't have this one mapped yet, analyzer, so let's do a quick learning session on how do you draw lines of support and resistance. So, some of y'all have seen this before, so bear with me. I'm on the weekly time frame right now, so I'm going to map my support and resistance levels historically that are showing to hold true over time. So you can see here, this held as resistance multiple times over and over. It also served as a support here. Support tends to turn resistance and vice versa. So we also have some support here in this zone. I'm going to be more conservative with it, and I'm going to go all the way up into here because you can see we have more points crossing. Arguably you can move it higher, but I'm going to put a second one over here because it crosses there. I want to move this up. I want to be even more conservative. Same thing on this resistance zone right there. And then I'm going to go from the weekly over to the daily. And on the daily, you can see that these levels are being respected, right? What I want to see on this, which I'm not actively trading this at the moment. Airlines are just so hit or miss because the most random things can cause havoc for them. But as of right now, I would be watching on this to see, does it break out to the upside? Or does it lose the support range it's got going on here and break to the downside? It looks like it wants to maintain the upside target. Let me draw this for you as a bullish scenario. I'm not going to draw it as a bullish megaphone. I'm going to draw this as the near term, short, small, bull flag it is. I mean, ideally it stays a pennant, but even if it didn't, if it breaks down from the pennant, look for it to form this flag like this. So I'm going to draw both so that you have it for reference when I post the chart here in a little bit. That's a bull flag. Keep an eye just on this setup overall, because what you want to make sure is that that doesn't turn into a reversal. Especially with that selling having increasing volume behind it. Be careful, because there's also a head and shoulders pattern there. I know it's probably not super obvious, but it's there. If you're trying to figure out what the heck I'm looking at. So that is a head and shoulders. You have a high, a low. Actually, I guess in theory I could do this, and it's even more formal, right? And it looks cleaner, so we'll go with that. There's no definitive, by the way, it's kind of odd for me to even see one that's that flat because typically they're not that textbook perfect. And this is, I guess, a good example too. I'm glad you brought this one up, Chapito. Tony, I just read your messages on Need Advil, not as did AI, APLD, Rivian, and SoFi. No judgment, dude. But this is a good example of why you want to monitor patterns, both bullish scenario and bearish scenario, because both patterns are present in this given chart, just like in SPX, SPY, Tesla, many other situations we've seen recently where there's both bullish and bearish patterns present. If you hyper focus only on the bullish patterns, you're going to get burned sooner or later, and that's just not a safe or the right way to trade. So it's important to acknowledge both patterns in both directions and see which pattern confirms and which pattern invalidates. So how do we know what happens here? If you get a big candle, big strong buying volume candle, big green candle that pushes out to the upside with strong volume, high volume, and it really just blows through that resistance range and that supply zone, that's good. That's a bullish breakout. Me personally, I would personally wait for the back test on it, or to wait for confirmation with the follow through candle and then trade the upward continuation. Alternatively, if this thing breaks this neckline or the support to the downside, the measured move of that given setup would be about 12%, but when I do any kind of measurements, I like to stay super conservative. So on this one, I would mark my next key support as my measured move to the downside, if I was going to trade that to the downside. In this situation, you could look for the break the neckline and confirmation for that move, and then you could trade that if you wanted to. Alternatively, if you want to be extra safe, you could also watch and see for a break of this trend line. But that's also going to be a very small range of trade if you're going to trade that. Plus, there's a minor support right there in that range too, right? So I wouldn't trade puts on something like this, and this is why I look at both sides of it, and I'm not going to kind of specifically do one thing or the other, right? The risk to reward, I'd have to look at what options cost on it. If I was going to scalp a quick rapid move, I might do that, but both patterns very much present here. I don't know what's going on with United Airlines at the moment, but definitely worth keeping an eye on. So glad you brought that one up. We'll keep tracking it. You said Wolf too. So Wolf is going to be right there in the bucket with all the other crypto stocks, right? So it's going to be tied at the hip with Bitcoin and all the other miners. If you look over here at crypto stocks, notice how they all basically are just moving in parallel with one another at the moment. So coin, I need to probably add some longs on that. MicroStrategy, same thing. I need to buy some MSTY on Friday. Also, y'all remind me, I'm going to do a new account challenge on Friday. I'm going to throw some money from a bonus into a separate account, and we're going to trade that like a small account challenge. So I may do it as like a 3 or 5K account, but I'm going to do it to where you can scale the volumes for a $500 account using the same contracts, or a $5,000 account using more contracts. So be on the lookout for that. Let me look at the other tickers here in the YouTube chat. Sorry, I'm checking 2 different Discords and the YouTube chat at the moment. Armin said Palantir solid company. It's priced to me. It's the year 2029. Man, have you seen what Nvidia has done the last 2 or 3 years? That being said, like Palantir, so there's a lot of aspects of Palantir that I don't think people are really aware of, especially with their contracts with the government. So regardless of politics and how people feel about it, one of the main software drivers and agreements that Palantir also has involvement with is immigration control, deportation, and identification of individuals for deportation. So their software does that. So they've got contracts with that. We all know what the current administration is doing, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Profit to earning ratio means absolutely nothing when it comes to SaaS companies like this, man. People have been talking about P&E on, SaaS companies for a long time, and really a better thing to look at when you're looking at a SaaS company is the rule of 40. Again, I work in this realm, so this is kind of one thing that it's near and dear, and I live in it every day. But if their Rule of 40 is sustaining and looking strong from a profitability to a growth standpoint, then companies going to keep on cranking, and investors are going to be looking at that as their main criteria. So right now, the Palantir Rule of 40, I think when I looked at it the other day, it's still 60 something, which is a freaking fantastic Rule of 40. Obviously, like the 40 there, you want it to be 40 or higher. 60 something Rule of 40 is fantastic. So definitely do some looking at that. Let's see, what other tickers were requested? VRT, VST, VRT. Looks like I at least charted this partially at some point. Delete these previous ones because I haven't looked at it in a long time. Their electronic production. Marking this gap with the dotted purple because it's yet to be filled. Dude, I'm glad you brought this one up. I kind of dig this. I don't know how expensive options are on it. Hold on. We're going to check something. Hang with me. Oh, they have earnings this week. Okay. I didn't even look at that on the chart. Yeah. I don't know. If I was going to trade that, I'd wait till after earnings, personally, which it looks like it's tomorrow morning, so I guess you have to, unless you're going to buy shares. But might see what comes out on the earnings as far as forward-looking guidance and outlook, and more importantly, what levels does it sorry, I can't talk. What levels does it respect following earnings? If it gets a pullback and bounces at that support level, might be a good opportunity to jump in some calls if you're bullish on the long-term outlook on it. I'll put it on my list to kind of keep an eye on tomorrow over here. Which tomorrow I've got to go check on Lucid. I've got to go to the WeWork for a team meeting, so that'll remind me to go check on our investment. Because the WeWork, there's a Lucid dealership over there, which I've seen 3 personal owned Lucids here in my area lately, which is interesting. Let's see. So VRT is definitely one I want to keep an eye on. What about VST? What's VST? Extra? Oh, I've charted that one too. It's almost like y'all been on here before. So this overall, it's maintaining bullish structure longer term. So aside from that trend break, which it looks like it broke down and then it held that, it looks like it's forming a bull flag on the weekly. It also had some dissipating volume here. That weekly's still forming though. So, interesting. Very interesting. It's utilities, right? So utilities and industry. You're about to be getting exposed to all kinds of fun stuff here in the next couple of seconds that y'all have not seen. But I'm curious. If you're wondering why I'm looking at the short data, because this company, it's obviously it's not shorted, but like, so if I see a company that's got really tight consolidation, which this is starting to, and it has high short score and short data, not like the nonsense that we were all told back with GameStop and AMC back in the day. Instead, learn how to interpret this data, and it can be really valuable. People can attest this, see me trade some stuff on there lately, but BBAI being one of them, or MVSD, but watch this. This one's not shorting, like it's not short squeeze candidate. I just wanted to look at that to see if it was, if you had a big strong buying pop come into play, you can have a huge breakout on stuff like that, but this one doesn't. So yeah, I would watch these levels on it, see what's going on. Definitely want to watch that resistance right there in that zone, it looks like. See what it does, and then this one. I'm not in this ticker personally, but definitely keep an eye on these levels, see what happens. It does have that gap right there. It could fill to the upside. Utilities and energy sector, going to be a little interesting right now with all the administration stuff in general. So so you see a Lucid every day in LA as well, which I haven't looked at the Lucid chart, and I'm wondering. Yeah, that pullback doesn't bother me. And here, like, let's look at this. Show y'all a little something. So Lucid, if you don't know, the PIF, or the Public Investment Fund with the Saudis, they own like a ridiculous portion of Lucid. So the outstanding shares, they own 58% of Lucid, right? What's short score looking like on Lucid these days? I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not super high either. So, Lucid, I traded this inverse head and shoulders breakout. It is holding above that downtrend breakout there, so that's positive. EV sector right now is going to be very hit or miss with all the stuff that's going on with the administration, all the changes to tax benefits and everything else with charging. So definitely keep an eye out for that. It's forming another larger inverse head and shoulders here, potentially on the weekly, that's worth keeping an eye on. If it holds a bounce right here off this support zone, I'm going heavy on more leap calls, as well as shares, because I exited my shares when we made that previous reversal. But yeah, inverse head and shoulder, if it plays out there, that'd be sweet. I don't know. I want to see it hold that support range, because right now that is in a downtrend. Ideally, I'll wait for reversals, but price action is down. Volume is heading down too, so this is signaling buyer exhaustion if it can hold a bounce. Good price action tip there for volume and looking at basics. Notice there's not a ton of indicators here. I'm not getting hung up on simple moving average or exponential moving average and all that crap. I think they serve their place, they're valuable, but a trading strategy focused just on whether the 50 MA or the 50 EMA or the 200 SMA, if you're focusing just on that, you can get burned. I mean, AMD's a good example of that dove and blew right through it. Right now, AMD's still treading on water. May potentially break down because it's struggling in this zone. So if it loses that 107 support, it's in 94. But what are the other tickers? ASTS. So ASTS, I don't know if you were in before the pop or not, but that sucker ripped last week. I was in shares and in calls. Sold my calls too early, but remained in some shares. So we'll see what happens. I want to see it maintain this breakout, this downtrend, because it's looking sweet with that falling wedge breakout. Volume was huge pop, so definitely a good one to keep an eye on here, especially if it back tests. I think my share entry is like 24.66, so I probably should sell a covered call to hedge or something, but I'll keep an eye on it. Let's see. BBAI may finally reverse. Analyzers throwing jokes at Tony about the Lucids. The dude still didn't believe in Rivians either, I don't think. But literally look out him at the window all the time. So Rivian, I've been watching to see if it can hold this zone in range, for instance, because Tony just asked about Rivian for those that didn't see it. But that's the inverse head and shoulders that's forming there as well. So I want to see if it can hold the support range, and I'll be adding to shares and long calls if it does. Rivian, I've got a bullish outlook on it. Multiple reasons why. For the sake of time, I won't dive into all that here, but I think it's kind of caught up with the EV sector right now, and a lot of the pullback that's going on with that. But overall, it seems like it's holding the range very well compared to some of the competitors, and Amazon uses them heavily. Amazon's still cranking and rolling out tons of packages, and speaking of Amazon, notice how it's trying to hold the support range as well. It completed the upside measured move. I haven't entered new long calls on this thing yet. I want to wait it out and see. But I might do so if I see some bounce holding there. Apple we looked at earlier. Google's in a potential breakdown here, guys. So I locked gains on some. I finally entered swing puts on Google today, or maybe it was yesterday. Can't recall. Kind of blurring days together. Trimmed gains on it, but decided to stay in a few runners because we rejected at that 185 resistance. So we can see more downside movement on Google if it can't hold support range. Just be cautious here. Again, not ultimately long term. I want to be bullish on Google. I love the setup, especially if it can hold this zone. That being said, all it takes with Google to take a dive is like one random article related to antitrust lawsuit, and the thing freaking dies 5 to 10%. So no, I haven't Rocket Lab yet, but I will. Gotta wrap up here in a few minutes because my daughter has got gymnastics. So Rocket Lab, I know most people that were trading with me locked gains on the calls we were in on Friday. I'm sorry, yesterday. My days are clearly blurring together still. Nice big huge pop, but I'll be looking to see, does it hold this range again? If it does, might re-enter more long calls on the support bounce, but it's got strong consolidation going on right now. Rocket Lab, I don't know if anyone's following them closely. They got a lot of really promising things going on, and they got a lot of good contracts going on with NASA. So Rocket Lab's definitely on my list of something I like. I did everything but Fubo. I thought that you were telling us about Fubo. I didn't realize you asked me to do Fubo. So yeah, Fubo, here's what you got. I'm not personally like trading Fubo here. If it loses that support, it's probably going to head on down to that gap fill. What was the one ticker that 12 was alerting and trading earlier that just went absurd? Was it SOPA? Is that what it was? I gotta go look at it now. Yep, sure enough. I don't even know. SOPA finds these low, or SOPA, wow. 12 finds these low, like, market cap stocks that, like, make me channel my inner meme frenzy again. Look at this crap. Huge rip. Good catch, 12. Ooh, very nice catch. Break out of that falling. So I bet you. Yeah. So it looks like it previously was actually heavily shorted, and that's why that volume did what it did when it broke out of that trend. I'm guessing they got some kind of news as well. And whenever you got short interest there, like this is short squeeze movement, where you're moving like 100% plus a day. Again, not little 3 to 5% moves we see on big tech. That's not short squeeze movement. This kind of crap is short squeeze movement. So good catch on this one. Definitely got to keep an eye on that and check it out. Let's see what others we got. Got time to do maybe one or two more. Let me. Make sure I didn't skip somebody over here. Oh my gosh, Tony said he saw a bunch of Rivian Amazon trucks. He believes. So, yeah, no, that's the inside funny. It's been going on for like 6 months now. For those of y'all that don't know, Tony was like acting like these Rivian trucks that Amazon uses were mythical creatures that didn't exist, even though some of us look at them daily. Let's see. Tickers. Covered that. What else was on the swing list? No shit. 12, did they really delay their quarterly financials? Shady. For those that don't know, like, no. I'm surprised it hasn't dove yet. Like, come on, how can you be that large of a company yet can't get your crap together from an accounting practice standpoint? And y'all know all the drama that came up related to that account, or not account, but that stock several months ago, where auditor basically quit because he didn't want to be involved with it. So yeah, I don't know. This thing holds where it is. I might end up buying puts on it after all. Interesting. Let's see. Let me see other tickers that are on the list. Oh, people are freaking out about Global Star. So Global Star shifted over to NASDAQ, and part of the compliance and regulatory shift with that was doing a reverse split. So like Global Star, they've got several like key contracts. Like look, $1 billion contract to build satellite constellation and several other things. So like I'm still bullish on Global Star. If anything, I kind of prefer this share price point anyways. Looking for adding more calls once this is through, because it's previously in some, but also adding shares. So Global Star looking good there. too costly to submit in a timely manner. Yeah, who they gotta pay to cook the books, basically, right? Checking one or two more tickers over here on this list. I'm trying to see which ones take priority. If there are other tickers, I'll go ahead and say it right now while y'all are waiting. If there's other tickers y'all want to see technical analysis on, just shoot me a message, whether it's on Facebook or Discord or whatever. Feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll take a look at them for you and then post the detailed analysis for you. But I'm trying to check this real quick. What's Starbucks doing? Starbucks maintaining this bullish setup here. I want to see what happens if it can break out to the upside. ABBV. Alright, I've been holding off on entering this thing for months, even though Tony has got some salt towards this stock at this point, which that's a bullish engulfing, so I dig that. But ABBV finally made sense for me to enter some long-term calls on, which I found made some nice further out ones for cheap. But the setup makes sense, and I saw some nice movement on the options chain to support it. So I'm watching to see if it can break to the upside with some increasing volume. AMD we already talked about. Toll I won't talk through, we won't have time. Intel we kind of glanced at earlier. Lockheed Martin I think is going to end up popping off, especially with all the other nonsense that's starting to happen. And it's holding this key support level here. I took a very small position on some longer term Lockheed Martin calls finally, and usually I would not purchase something that's that expensive because risk to reward, but it was far enough out and significant enough demand zone here that I felt okay going with it. So definitely looking for a reversal to take place there. Let's see. Alright, on that note, I'll probably wrap up after I do MU, because I just saw that come through the chat. I'm not going to leave you hanging. So MU, here's my thing on MU, and honestly it applies to any semiconductors right now. There's so much uncertainty and risk around semiconductors at the moment that, like, unless you're hedging yourself heavily on longer term calls with some puts or a spread or something, it's just not worth it, because all it's going to take is one random news article about tariffs or something else to drop, or somebody get pissed off, and a lot of these semiconductors are going to bomb hard, especially if we get past what they've said the next 3 to 4 weeks, where there's going to be discussions with a lot of semiconductor and car companies. Y'all have seen firsthand now how significant of an impact the tariffs are going to have on the market. Every time someone says tariffs, we get a huge, massive move during intraday. So MU, same category overall. It's in this big bear flag at the moment. This thing hasn't confirmed a break to the downside, but also it's not confirming any kind of reversal either. So this thing can most certainly go either way. I haven't looked at options on MU, and honestly, I would want to wait to get confirmation of which direction it's going to go before I traded that. But yeah, it's looks like it's just consolidating across this range. And that is, I mean, it's like a $20 range, but the options premiums are kind of wacky on MU if I recall. So it didn't make sense when I looked down to try to trade something to the upside with that overhead resistance, or downside with such close support levels in play, which that gap is filled. So yeah, that's what's going on with that. Finally trimmed more Uber calls this morning at open, which I'm glad, because it tapped that level and rejected, but Uber had a sweet little setup. Those calls ripped on it. Rocket Lab, we already glanced at. Several of these others, like, these are all good examples, kind of what we talked about last week, where there's lots of stocks out there that have good potential, and you don't have to trade big tech with large accounts to be able to get exposure to them. So this thing's got a sweet little setup on AT&T, by the way. I entered some nice calls on this, the swing calls, and they are moving much slower, and it's a good way for somebody to trade options and get used to something without the volatility that comes with some of the bigger tech tickers. So AT&T had a nice bullish breakout going into play, so jumped into calls, and it looks like it's going to keep the momentum going. I probably should trim those minimally tomorrow if we hold that range, just to cover my cost basis, but good ticker. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. If, like I said earlier, if there's any tickers y'all specifically want me to pull, charts for or analysis on, or do the detailed breakdown on it, we did AI earlier, analyzer, in all of half a second. But it's in there. But I'll give you the detailed breakdown for AI for sure. If there's anything else you'll need specifically chart-wise, feel free to send me a message. I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. If not, I'm going to wrap it up. If anyone needs anything, reach out. Hope everyone has a great evening, blessed day tomorrow. Make some more gains. Thanks all.